Hello and welcome to my channel. If you're the returning viewer, welcome back. It's great to have you back again. And if you have just stumbled across this channel by chance, stay where you are, don't go anywhere. I really need the views. So, what are we talking about today? That's a good question. I'm glad you asked me. Today we are talking about 5 things that would make me either not buy a book, not read a book, or to DNF a book if I come across it when I'm reading. So let's go into a bit more detail quickly of what I mean. So I'm talking about things that I would find too repulsive, too shocking, or too upsetting to want to possess in my collection, to want to possess this in a book, to want to possess it in my collection, or to want to continue reading a book. Now, I know that sounds really, really weird considering the title of the channel, and this is a channel where we can talk about horror, fictional horror, or sometimes real life horror. It sounds weird. I know it sounds odd. But I think that, I wouldn't say everyone has their limits, but I do have my limits. And there are certain things that I don't want to read. There are certain things, if it's in a book, I don't want to possess it in my collection. Maybe that's just a quirk. That's a quirk that I have. Let me know if you have the same sort of thing. So, okay, what are the things that would put me off, that would make me DNF, not buy a book at all, or not read a book at all? Number one, the biggie, would be animal cruelty. Okay, so, I love animals, and animal cruelty is a thing that particularly upsets me just in general. And also in fiction, it's something that I don't want to read about. It's just something that it's just a no-no for me. An example is right here in The Night Flyers by Joe Lansdale. Now, quickly, I've got to say that this is not a comment on Joe Lansdale as an author. I actually own several Joe Lansdale books, and I really, really enjoyed reading them. This is the only Lansdale that I've DNF'd so far. I think he's a really, really great writer. I've really enjoyed all of his other work. So this is not any kind of a slight against Joe Lansdale, against his books. It's not a slight against this book because I DNF'd it. I didn't finish it. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't read it or it's not a good book, it's not a good story. I'm just saying that for me, I came to a certain point and that was enough. So what was this point? And what's the book about? The book is basically about a woman who is assaulted by a group of unsavory types, and her husband is a bit too much on the liberal side for her. And that's really as far as I got, because quite near the beginning of the book, there's a scene of animal cruelty. I didn't finish reading the scene. I'm not going to go into detail on what it was, but for me, I tapped out, at that point. I was tapping out, the referee was like, the referee stopped the match, and, that was it. And because it was just, in my opinion, it was gratuitous. It absolutely wasn't necessary, in my opinion, and I just didn't want to read it. So animal cruelty is a big one for me. There's another book, for example, which I haven't read, I don't own it, called The Troop by Nick Cutter, and I've heard that it contains a scene of animal cruelty as well. And knowing that, that's a book that I'm going to give a swerve to. That, again, that's not a slight against Nick Cutter. It's not a slight against the book. These are just 2 examples of something that, for me, would cause me to DNF or not read a book. At number 2, okay, so I don't have a specific copy to wave at you, unfortunately, so you just have to use your imagination while I do this. But looked a bit sus, didn't it, when I did that? Anyway, number 2 will be torture. Now, I know that sounds weird. This is supposed to be a channel about horror, and I'm going on about torture. I mean, what am I? I mean, you must think that I'm kind of like I must spend the day on a fainting couch going, oh, my salts, oh, good gracious me. And yeah, I do spend a good amount of time exactly like that, but for various reasons. But torture is very much kind of hit and miss for me. For example, I have a book here, Vlad, okay? Now, it's called Vlad. It's by an author called C.C.Humphrey. I've read this book. I really enjoyed it. Now, it's called Vlad. Try to guess who it could be about. Is it about Vlad Smith? Is it about Vlad Abdul Muhammad? Is it about Vlad Varinsky? No, I think we know who it's talking about. It's talking about Vlad the Impaler. Now, with a moniker like Vlad the Impaler, I think that we can kind of see, what kind of person old Vlad was. If you're not familiar, Vlad the Impaler was the Prince of Wallachia. I think it's modern day Romania. But I'm rambling. I'm not going to get into all that now. This book contains scenes of brutality and torture, but for me it was manageable. For me, it all depends on how it's done. If it's manageable or not. If a scene really disturbs me, then I don't really want the book in my collection. I don't want to own it, and I don't really want to continue reading it. But for some reason, this book was okay. Generally, I can handle some pretty strong stuff. So it's not that I'm always put off by any scenes of cruelty or what have you. I mean, I wouldn't be interested in the horror genre. But some things are a bit too far. So an example of something that's too far? Well, okay, you may be aware of the series Shogun, the 2024 TV series that's currently streaming. It's a mega hit at the moment. If you've seen Shogun, you probably know what I'm talking about. In episode 1, there's a scene where, and in the book, and also in the 1980 TV series, there's a scene where one of Blackthorn's crew is boiled alive. And for me, this is one of the most horrifying things in print and on screen I've ever seen or read. That is way too distant. That takes it way too far. It depends on how it's done, but that scene, let's say in the book, is too much for me. I mean, too much in the sense of it's really, 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 really disturbing, and I just find it too disturbing. So with torture, it depends on how it's done. There's another example. Sorry, I was talking with my back turned. There's another example. For example, A Song of Ice and Fire, is full of, it's not exclusively, but it's full of, disturbing scenes and torture. And this volume contains a scene, if you've read the book, you'll know what I'm talking about, when the Mountain and his men go to an inn and they take turns assaulting the daughter of an innkeeper. It's an incredibly awful scene. And it didn't cause me to DNF, but it's very disturbing. It's very, very disturbing. And it's kind of one of the things that's at the limit of what I can stomach. Okay, next up, number 3, something that I don't like. This is more in the case of I wouldn't buy a book with this particular thing in it, which is weird because it's the animal as protagonist. So, where the animal is the bad guy. Weird because on this very channel, I've got a video about a book called The Rats. So the titular rats in this book, they are the antagonists. They go around making a right nuisance of themselves, eating people. So, you could say, well, why the hell have you read this book? If you can't stand the animal as protagonist. This is a bit of an exception for me. It's actually the only book probably I own where animals are a protagonist. And I read it, after giving it a good amount of thought. And I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good book. I'll probably read the second one in the series as well. Not really the third one. It doesn't appeal to me so much. But in general, yes, I don't like animals as the protagonist, simply because in real life, the only species I consider to be actually monsters are my fellow human beings. Humans are the only species, in my opinion, of actual calculated evil and cruelty. We're the only species that, since day one of us crawling out of the primordial ooze, have actually thought up worse and worse and worse and worse ways to treat our fellow humans, to torture our fellow humans, to make our fellow humans suffer. So, and when you think of what we do to animals, we are the ones who inflict pain and horror on them 99.9% of the time. Now, that might sound preachy or whatever. If it does, great, because there's nothing wrong with having a discussion. If you think I'm talking nonsense, let me know, because I would like, it's no problem if you don't agree with me. We can have a discussion about it. Okay. Next up, so I don't have an example to wave at you, but it will be abuse of children, domestic abuse. An example will be The Girl Next Door by Ramsey Campbell, which is based on a real-life story, a girl called Sylvia Likens. You may well be familiar with the story, who was horrifically abused by a woman who was supposed to be taking care of her, along with some neighbourhood children. I'm not going to go into that now. But this story for me, it's the book is based on a true story. I think there's also a film based on it. And again, it's not a slight against the book. It's not a slight against Ramsey Campbell. I've got a Ramsey Campbell novel. He's a great writer. Just for me, the subject matter is too disturbing. Okay? I'll have to refer to my notes because I may well have forgotten something. The other one, which I forgot, see notes there, you see the professionalism, actually referring to previous preparation. This was actually supposed to be at number 4, but it's actually at number 5. Okay, now it's at number 5. Okay, fiction that glorifies real life scumbags. So I'm talking about anything which I'm not talking about fiction which features real life individuals. I mean, we've got Vlad back there. I just think that in some cases, real life scumbags tend to get mythologized to the extent where they get, where they become like supervillains. Jack the Ripper would be a classic example, in my opinion. I know there's a great deal of Jack the Ripper fiction out there. Full disclosure, haven't read most of it, or any of it actually. Most of it, and but from what I can understand, just from browsing, Jack the Ripper has become, obviously a mythological figure, but he's also become, in some cases, I think, like kind of supervillain, like Batman or Hannibal Lecter or Batman. What am I talking about? The Joker, Hannibal Lecter, Darth Vader. He's always Dracula. He's entered the realm, the kind of pantheon of supervillain, and I think that that's wrong because in real life we don't know who Jack the Ripper was. But let's remember that he murdered 5 women. Yes, the canonical 5. We don't need to get into a discussion of whether we think he killed 5 more or less, but there's the so-called canonical 5. So let's say he killed 5 women. Innocent women that didn't deserve what happened to them. And even though it happened a long time ago, he was certainly in real life, he wasn't this, guy walking around with a black cloak, and his black medical bag and a top hat. He would have just been some grubby little, pervy little scumbag, some inadequate, pathetic little scumbag. That's all he was in real life. We don't know who he was, but he was definitely this. He definitely isn't someone that, yes, the mythology, I can understand it, but he isn't someone that deserves to be, turned into this kind of like, supervillain type character. I feel the same way about like organized crime. I mean, there's, The Sopranos. I've never watched The Sopranos for the same reason. Glorifies scumbags. There's a TV program called Gomorrah in Italy. Same thing, glorifies the mafia or whatever. I don't like this kind of thing because, scumbags in real life, who really exist, don't deserve, or really existed, don't deserve to be glorified. Okay, a special mention. This is something that I think would cause a lot of people to either not consume at all, or to DNF, and that would be, say, racism, homophobia, discrimination in general. H.P. Lovecraft is an example of this, in the sense that H.P. Lovecraft, is often in the sights of people because they complain about his racism. So, would racism or homophobia or something like this cause me to DNF? No. If I knew something was blatantly offensive that had been written today, and it had been written with the intention of offending, then I probably wouldn't read it. No. But historical stuff, which can often be a bit off colour, I can take things in the context of the time in which they were written, and I can not make allowances for it. It's still abhorrent, but I don't let it get in the way of what I'm reading. So it's not something that would cause me to DNF or to not consume at all. Again, it would depend on the context, but I'm talking more about modern fiction, not historical things. I understand. I think that we have to take into account that people, 50, 80, 100 years ago didn't think the way we do now, and we have to take that into account. And we can also look at the historical validity of these works. I'm not just talking about horror. So there we are, 5 things that would cause me to not to DNF, to not read at all, to not buy. Okay, do you agree with my list? Do you disagree? Let me know what you think. It would be interesting if we could have a bit of a discussion. So, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye-bye.